and answers. The theory of American poetry becomes a practice of inquiry and invention. Watch Your Language offers the names and details of the known and less known poets housed in the mind, heart, and library of a poetry enthusiast. Any book that matters to a reader is literature. Any book that matters to a reader is permanently housed in their mental, emotional, psychic library. It is the sort of library Italo Calvino describes in the Uses of Literature. He imagines a culture's most significant books at the center of an ever-expanding, borderless library. Literature is a search for the book hidden in the distance that alters the value and meaning of the known books. It is a pull towards the new apocryphal text still to be rediscovered or invented. I hope any reader convinced of this constructs the appropriate, fluid, personal genealogy of reading, a creative shelter, a psychic databank, a resource for living. Watch Your Language offers a model for watching language wherever you find it. My first prose book, To Float in the Space Between, engaged a single poet and poem. In the New York Times, Ed Pavlich wrote, "The question of influence becomes one of connection more than resistance, collaboration more than anxiety." Hayes reminds us that the word influence is at root fluid. In the National Book Critics Circle citation for To Float in the Space Between, Walton Mayumba wrote, "Working in a kind of essayistic confessional style, Hayes considers political poetry, black masculinity, the end of marriage, absent biological fathers, the affections that fathers hold for sons, the beginning of love, kinship, and dream song." Watch Your Language expands scope to reflect on over a century of poets and poetry, on both canonized and overlooked poets. Like all views of history, the history of American poetry is full of blind spots and wormholes. I shudder at all that's covered by my blind spots, biases, and limitations. I can never say enough. I will have to write more about my bond to the poets of my generation, to my peers and students who have become peers, to my spirit sister, Elizabeth Alexander, and my bond beyond words to Yona Harvey. The bonds of your influence are boundless. Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Gwendolyn Brooks, Toy Daracot, Yusuf Komunyakaa, essentially every poet mentioned and several forgotten in these pages has impacted my outlook on poetry. I could not have completed this book without the teachers I found in books. Christopher McGowan's guide and reference book, 20th Century American Poetry, has been foundational in my survey of poetry courses for more than 20 years and was an invaluable resource in the construction of my poetry timeline and this preface, for example. I express my gratitude to Christopher McGowan and the makers of the Blackwell Guides to Literature series for supporting teachers, writers, and readers. My prose style plays across a pastiche of genres and tones. I aim paradoxically for Michael Schmidt's clarity and thoroughness in the nonfiction biographical sketches of Lives of the Poet and Roberto Bolaño's discursiveness and mischief in the mock biographies of Nazi literature in the Americas. In his preface to Memory of Fire, Eduardo Galeano says his approach to writing about history was antithetical to the way he learned history in school. History classes were like visits to the waxworks or the region of the dead. The past was lifeless, hollow, dumb. They taught us about the past so that we should resign ourselves with drained consciences to the present, not to make history, which was already made, but to accept it. Memory of Fire is another central book in the conception of this text. Watch Your Language muses over a century or so of American poetry with Galeano's attitude and lyric documentary style. It is the gaze of someone daydreaming through history, someone skipping English class to wander the aisles of the library. I admit an interest in poems produced after the Great Migration around the birth of Gwendolyn Brooks in 1917. I am interested in a history of American poetry adjacent to Brooks and those influenced by Brooks in the last century. Even Christopher McGowan's comprehensive text omits work by Gwendolyn Brooks from its list of seminal poetry collections of the 20th century. Watch Your Language investigates, revises, and reinvents the presences and omissions of a shared poetic history. In the How to Use This Book section of 20th Century American Poetry, McGowan writes that his chronology sets out the major social, political, and literary events of the century as they provide a broad context for the poetry. Poetry speaks across time and space. Your library is a time-traveling machine. This collection